All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. It's 12 noon, at least here in Atlanta. So we'll get started. Some people join late. That shouldn't be a problem. My name is Mark Munson, and I'm going to be kind of hosting today. Again, let's go ahead and just dive right into the content because we have a lot of things to cover. Today's session is session 2 out of a 6-session series that we're hosting of webinars over the next few months. I'll touch on that a little bit more at the close of today's call, but this session is Intro to BC for the GP user. We like to use acronyms, so obviously BC stands for Business Central, GP stands for Great Plains. Today, the goal is to kind of compare and contrast the two different solutions that exist out there and really kind of set a scenario up for, how do I do this in BC versus how I did it in GP. So that's the topic for today. Before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. Let me put this in presentation mode. That might be better. There we go. Let me get rid of the notes because I have no notes. Well, I can't get rid of the notes. But anyway, so next slide. As far as housekeeping items, just so that you know, all attendees have been muted. We have quite a few people we're expecting on the call today. Just to keep the background noise down, we have muted everyone. But we will be recording the session. That's another just note to yourself that we are recording the session. Questions, since you are muted, please enter any and all questions in the chat box. I'm going to be observing the chat box during the presentation. I will do my best to respond to any questions that are presented in the chat box. If not, we're going to take I think a little break in the middle of the webinar today and also at the end for any final Q&A. And we'll, like I said, address those during the presentation and at the end. If there are people here that know of others that might benefit from the presentation today, like I said, there will be a recording. Just shoot me an email, mmunson@acemicrotech.com. I'll be happy to get that recording out to you. And then also, we're offering for those that are attending today a free migration assessment. So if there's thoughts, interests, desires to explore what a migration from GP to Business Central might look like, we've got some pretty nice tools that takes a look at your data, takes a look at the overall effort, actually some ROI tools that can calculate return on investment from making the change. Happy to coordinate something with you. So reach out to either me or your account manager here at ACE, and they can schedule that with you. As far as what we're covering today, we're going to be looking at Office 365 and the Business Central admin. Just a high-level overview. I think most of the people on the call today are really more functional users than they are administrators. But we're going to touch on that briefly. We're going to look at what Microsoft has done with integration when it comes to Outlook and Excel. I mean, this is really, really, really one of the more powerful components that you're going to see today. Accessibility. So for those people that are used to having to be in the office and logging into GP, or at best case, going in through a remote desktop, you're going to see the availability of the solution in browser, tablets, phones. And then we're going to touch on kind of that whole comparison and contrast. What are the differentiators between the two? And what are the similarities between the two? And I think that's going to be a big part of the presentation today, and something that you guys will all find interesting. So before we get started, I wanted to kind of start off with a quick survey of people, and if you can just put this in the chat, I would certainly appreciate it. How long have you been on GP? If you can just kind of put the number of years you've been on GP in the chat. Just like to get just kind of a sense of the audience here. All right. And then also, are there current plans within your organization to move to Business Central? And if so, is there any kind of associated timeline? And Susan, can you put a question in the chat, please, to make sure it's working? All right. So we got, let's see here, 20 plus years, 16 years, 24 years, 16 years for one instance, 10 years for another. So obviously what we're seeing is a lot of long time, very loyal GP users, which is great. And you know, we're glad to be a part of that, you know, glad to have helped support that solution, and happy to continue to support that solution. So don't get us wrong here. If that's something that for now you're looking to stay on GP, you know, we're happy to assist. But if you are interested in making a move, we're happy to have those discussions as well. As far as plans on making a move, I see anywhere from maybe 2 to 3 years before moving over to, plan on moving next year. Familiar with it, chat is working, okay. Okay, spring of 2023. So yeah, we've had a big uptake in clients that have expressed some interest in making the move. We've moved probably a couple handfuls over at this point already. That process has gone fairly well. And we have a lot more that in 2023 have planned on making that change. So appreciate the feedback on that. All right, so let's continue on with the presentation itself. And presenting today, I'm happy to introduce Chris Zeiler. Chris is our Director of Cloud Solutions here at Ace Micro. He's a 20+ year veteran in the industry and has just a long and storied career in the GP world. He started off in the GP world, actually did some things prior to that, but probably a good 15+ years in Dynamics GP. So he knows that product very well. Last 4 or 5 years, he's really embedded himself in Business Central and has turned into kind of our resident expert on the solution itself. So in our mind, there was really no one better to present today than Chris, because he can give that experience from both sides of the house. So with that said, I'm going to turn it over to Chris, make him the presenter, and we'll move forward.
All right, thank you, Mark, for the introduction. I appreciate everybody joining us today. Like Mark said, I've been in the Dynamics GP space for a very long time. And let me see if I can get the right monitor here. I do have a couple, so I want to make sure. Let me see. Mark, can you tell me what screen you're seeing?
I can see, it looks like you've got some sort of prompt screen on here, OneNote up, and there you go. That's Intro to BC for the GP user is what I'm seeing now.
Okay. Sorry guys, give me 1 second. I'm just need to figure out this monitor issue. Number 2, okay. Show monitor 2. All right, you guys seeing Mark, you seeing the Microsoft 365 homepage?
I do.
All right, thank you. So like Mark was saying, I've been in the Dynamics GP space for about 15 years. In the last few years, I've been in the Business Central space. So today's demo, I'm going to show you kind of the ins and outs of Business Central, and then I'll also kind of have some callbacks to some functionality in GP so you guys can see some of the similarities and so forth. So the very first thing I'm going to start in is the Microsoft 365 homepage. And for some of you, this may be the Office 365 homepage. But this is really the nuts and bolts of Business Central. It's that foundation layer. Okay, so in the GP world, for those of you that have been at your company since the implementation, you know we have a GP server, we have SQL Server, we have a lot of infrastructure that's in place. You may or may not have a GP client installed on your workstation. Really, in the BC world, all of that goes away because it's a 100% cloud solution, really. And your key to get into the cloud solution is your single sign-on account. Okay, so when you log into Microsoft 365, you'll have a single account, which is often used as your email account for your organization. So for Ace Microtech, you know, my account is czeiler at Ace Microtech. However, I'm in a demo environment and I'm using an admin account today, but it's the same experience. It's a single sign-on across all of my products. So gone are the days of asking your administrator to reset my GP password, or my GP password isn't working. It's all the same password, and it's typically the same password you use to get into your computer. So, you know, greatly reduces the amount of overhead on that front. Also, we have all of our other Microsoft apps over here on our homepage on the left. And then for those of you that are using Office, you'll notice that SharePoint has some files that, you know, that you've been recently working on and that are backed up in the cloud and so forth. Okay, but this is kind of the home page for everything Business Central. Now I'm going to jump right into Business Central here, and you'll see when I click on my apps up here in the upper left, they call this the waffle button. You know, I have all my apps here that I'm used to using: OneDrive, Outlook, Word, and Excel. I know I'm in all the time, but I also have Business Central right down here to the right. So I can access Business Central, and the first thing it's going to ask me is, what environment do you want to go into? If any of you guys have done an upgrade with us, you'll know we'll have like a sandbox environment or a whole nother server set up. Well, in the cloud, it's very easy. We can have a production environment and multiple sandbox environments. So I'm going to choose production here, and it's going to take me directly into Business Central and show me my Role Center homepage. And before we really get started in showing you the ins and outs here, I want to show you the company login window, which is right up here in the top. You'll notice that it's telling me I'm in my production environment, and I've got a big red dot up there that says, hey, you're in a production company right now. Your administrator will set that up for you. So for those of you that have test companies, or you have other companies that you're constantly jumping back and forth in, when I click on this up here, it's going to show me all the companies that I have access to across all those environments. So I don't have to go and log into another workstation or another terminal server to get to a sandbox. Everything that I have access to is right here, and you'll notice that it's all grouped by which environment it's in. So I have a production environment with 2 companies in it, and then I have a sandbox environment with 2 companies in it. And I can quickly switch between those if I want to. All right, and just so everybody knows, anybody that knows the Fabricam database inside GP, the Kronos USA company is that same database inside Business Central that you'll all have access to. Okay, so before we jump into Business Central, what I want to do is take a step back, and let's start somewhere where all of us spend probably 35 to 40% of our time, and that's in Outlook.
Yep. Chris, let me interject real quick. Is there any way to make your screen any larger? I see it fine here, but I'm not sure. We had one question of expanding your screen.
I have it about as big as it can get right now. I can fill up a little more space there in terms of the browser. Okay. Maybe if that person that had the question, if you can expand out or maximize the GoToMeeting app on that screen that you're viewing it on, then it will explode it out and fill all the space.
Yeah, Jen, if you can try to expand out your GoToMeeting, that might be helpful as well, between what Chris did.
Yep.
Hopefully that helps.
So I'm going to go ahead and jump into Outlook here, where a lot of us spend most of our time, and I'm going to play the role of an AP accounts clerk, or accounts payable clerk. You know, typically you get a lot of invoices and a lot of inquiries via email. So what I want to show you here is I've got a few emails here from this person, Toby Road. And one of the key differences between Business Central is you can put contacts. You have a contact management system inside BC. So you can actually have people associated with your vendor records, people associated with your customer records. You know, GP, the lowest level at a customer is the location or the address code, right? But there's no real way to put anything more than a contact ID in there. Well, in Business Central, you have contacts, which are actually people with email addresses that are associated with those vendor and customer records. And really what that does for us is a lot of things, but when it comes to Outlook, it knows whenever I have an email here from Toby Road, it knows exactly what vendor record it's associated with. And if you look over here on the right, this Business Central fact box set that pulls out gives me a whole bunch of statistics related to that vendor. Okay, so I have an email here from Toby Road, says, can you please provide an update on the payment for invoice 108205? If I look over here on the right, I can see a whole bunch of information. And one thing that you'll see a lot with GP and Business Central, anyone that's worked with GP a long time knows that there's like an inquiry window for everything, right? There's payables transactions by vendor, payables transactions by document, vendor payment summary, vendor annual summary, right? A million inquiry windows, and it even has an inquiry menu at the top because there's so many of them. Well, in Business Central, it's very different. These fact box sets give you all of that information you need. So I can see Toby Road right here. The last time I cut a payment to him was 2/16/2022. And of course, blue text means show me more. I can drill right in and I can see all the payments that I sent to him directly from Outlook here. And I can expand these out and take a look closer. But this request here is really for a particular invoice, 108205. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the balance up here. We've got an open balance of $33,000 for this vendor. When I open it up, I'm going to see all those open invoices, and BC does a really good job of color coding things. So I can see I have some red invoices down here. That means they're overdue based on the due date. And there it is, 108205. It's in the balance list, so it means it's unpaid. And I can actually hit this button up here if I want to expand this out into a bigger window. And that's going to show me that same list, and I'm going to be able to see all my information. I'll see my amounts and so forth for that vendor. And just like GP, it's the same sort of concept, right? I have my original document amount, and then that's different than my remaining amount, right? Which is net of all my applications or credits or payments that have been applied. Okay, so I can see everything that's here. I can see up 108205. It's still open. I can now write that person back and tell them, hey, we're going to get it paid this week. Okay. All right. In addition, so I've got a lot of information there. I can see my open balances. I can see outstanding purchase orders. So if I have open purchase orders to this vendor and I really quickly want to see what should be coming this week, I can click on my outstanding orders and I can see all of my order lines down here. These are inventory items that are on those purchase orders. In addition, I can see a quick aging summary. It was 33,193 was the balance. You can see I'm in the negative here. I got 15,000 is due now. I got 18,000, which is in my first bucket. So I can really quickly see a quick aging graphic on that. And then I have these tiles here where I can drill in and see the specific documents that relate to this vendor. So I can see that one order if I want to, if I've got some purchasing quotes or credit memos or even invoices that are unposted, I can quickly drill into those and see them. Okay, one other thing that's really cool, I've got another email here from Toby Road, and this one is a new invoice. Okay, so I've got, notice my fact box set updates because it noted that Toby Road is part of Wide World Importers here. So what I can do is I can start my purchase invoice directly here from Outlook. So I can click on my action button up here in the upper right, and I can click on new purchase invoice directly from this email. And you'll notice that I've got a document here, 2034-1000. So I can go ahead and click on purchase invoice here. That's going to open up a form that's going to be pre-populated with the vendor name and my contact and everything. And I'll go ahead and expand this out just so you can see a little more real estate on it. And it keeps throwing it on my other screen here. Okay, so here's my purchase invoice document form. Okay, this is the same as it would look if I were inside Business Central, but you can see I have a header up here that's got the vendor name that's pre-populated. I've got my contact because it came from Toby via email in here. And I got my vendor invoice number. I can go ahead and pop that in there, 2034-1000. And just in case I did this before, I'm going to put an A, old GP trick there. And you'll notice down here at the bottom, one key difference between payables in GP and payables in Business Central is that Business Central has one purchase invoice window. whether you're doing expenses for accounts like G&A expenses, or whether you're matching invoices to receipts that were received against purchase orders, it's all the same window. So you can see I have a type here on my lines. I've got GL accounts or inventory items, or I can capitalize a fixed asset. You know, very different than in the GP world. You only have to train a user to go to a single window to do purchase invoices. You don't have to train them on payables transaction entry and receiving transaction entry and purchase invoice entry like you do on the GP side. It's very different. You will notice that it defaulted in my GL account related to Wide World Importers. I can have default purchase accounts just like I do inside GP, and I can have those defaults for me, or I can have it prompt me to select from a list of default purchase accounts for a particular vendor. So I'm just going to change this to shipping costs. I'm going to go ahead and put an amount in here, right? So I am good to go there. I can attach that document to this invoice. So I can go to my attachments. I can click my button. I can choose that invoice. If I did that from over here on the right, I could actually do it directly from the email. I wouldn't have to save it first. But now that I've got my line items entered, I've got my vendor invoice in there, I can go ahead and post this and get rid of it, or I could send this off for approval. So Business Central has several levels of approval that are out of the box. You can go ahead and enter those approval levels and make sure that these invoices go into a queue to be approved before they are actually posted. Okay, so a lot of functionality here in terms of getting invoices into the system and so forth. Okay, so I'm not going to post that. I'm going to keep that open. I've got it still over here on the right because I just sort of I expanded it and then I brought it down. What I can do, let me just try this really quick. I can go into my my ellipsis here for actions, and I can pull in my attachment, and I can choose my attachment, and you'll notice that this attachment right here, 2034-1000, I can just go ahead and attach it from the email. I don't have to upload it from my workstation, and it'll go ahead and pop that PDF right into the attachment for the invoice. And then I've got my action buttons here. I can go ahead and post this if I want to. Okay, so really cool. A lot of functionality there that you just don't have on the GP side. And again, a lot of the examples that I'm going through in the purchasing module are all mirrored in the receivables module as well. And a lot of the inquiries and ledger lists that I'm about to show you, they're the same in inventory and so forth. So before I move on from my Outlook connector here, are there any specific questions related to that, Mark, that we need to address? Anybody in the chat?
Nope, no questions at this point, Chris. I'd say keep going.
Okay. All right, great. So I'm gonna go ahead and close out of Outlook here. I'm gonna go into Business Central, and I kind of showed you from the Microsoft 365 homepage that I've got a link right here that I can go right into Business Central. I could put that in my favorites for my web browser as well. But when I first log into Business Central, I'm going to get my Role Center homepage, which is what you're looking at right here. And as I already showed you, you've got your switch companies icon up here in the upper right, so I can switch into different companies. It'll always take me into my default company. The first thing I want to show you is along the top, the navigation between GP and Business Central is very different. Business Central is very role-based, right? So when you look up here at the top, you're going to see specific actions under these role-based menus that relate to the role that you have selected for yourself. So I have what's called a business manager role, which is sort of overarching between receivables, payables, and operations. So I have finance, cash management, sales, purchasing, and then Shopify. We've got an e-commerce integration here. So I do have some Shopify windows as well. So these menus are all based on that role. They don't have much to do with my security, which is another thing, but they are related to my role. So I can have an AP clerk role that has navigation that's very different than my business manager role or my salesperson role. So you have a lot more kind of features and leverage in terms of how do I present the system to my different users based on role? Okay. Now, if you want a menu that looks very similar to Dynamics GP, you can go ahead and click on this button right here, and this looks very similar to the GP homepage. Whenever you click on that home button or you click on your sales button, right, it shows you all of your options kind of lined up under those different series or functional areas. And then to draw the parallel all the way to GP and how it builds its menus, you can explore everything that your user has access to. So here is it completely expanded for everything that my user has security to, regardless of the role. Okay, so if I'm ever looking for something, I can do that there. I'm going to click on my company ID in the upper left right here to go back to my home page. And now I'm going to show you the most powerful navigational tool that's inside Business Central, and that is really my contextual search up here. So I have a search icon, and I can type in anything here, any keyword, and I'm going to get the result set back for any reports that relate to my keyword, any pages inside the system, any documentation that's related to that keyword, and then any apps, third-party apps that are out there that I could evaluate related to my keyword search. And I'll tell you, this is probably the way I navigate the system 90% of the time. You know, I think we all live in a world right now, whenever you don't know something, you go to a search engine, you pick up your phone, you search Google or Bing or whatever your search engine is of choice. And this search feature up here in Business Central really takes that into your ERP system. So if you notice, I can very quickly go to my vendor list. I can see my vendor list from here as well. But most important here is if I'm looking for information for something, like maybe I want some information on 1099s, right? How do I do 1099s? So I can look up here, and then I can search the documentation for 1099s right here inside Business Central. When I click on that, I'm going to see different topics that are related to setting up 1099s inside BC. And when I open that up, I'm going to go right to the Dynamics 365 documentation, and I have the full-blown documentation list inside Business Central. I can look up things. This is all online. You're not searching for PDFs like in the GP world. You know, this is all online and updated constantly. All right, so I'm gonna jump back here. All right, so we talked about the search capabilities. Let's look down here a little bit on your Role Center homepage, and I want to show you, give you kind of a guide of what some of these pages look like inside BC. So right along the top, these activities, I've got a couple of activity queues here, and this is very similar to GP if you've ever used the navigation queues on your desktop. But I've got overdue sales invoice amounts, then I've got overdue purchase invoice amounts. So this is basically the first bucket, or I should say the overdue buckets of my AP accounts payable. So I've got 49,422, and I've got some coloration there that tells me, is that good, bad, or terrible, right? This is kind of a yellow color, so it's not good, it's not bad, it's kind of right in the middle. But when I click on it, it's going to take me into what's called the vendor ledger entries. All right, and this is where we're really different than GP. Every single subledger has what's called ledger entries, and it's a Power Smart List. It's called a list page, but it's a Power Smart List of all of those documents that relate to that subledger. So you remember I clicked on overdue purchase invoices, so I'm seeing all invoices that are, you know, right of my current bucket on my accounts payable aging, and you can see they're all red because they're all overdue. Right, and I can see all my vendor names right here. Just like GP, I have the same kind of concepts on receivables and payables, where I have an original amount for the document itself, and then I have a remaining amount that is the net of those credits and payments that are applied to that document. When I select one of those invoices, over here on the right in my fact box set, I can see all of the accounts that are related to that in one quick view. Okay, I can very quickly see what GL accounts and so forth inside my fact box set. And of course, I could show the document and look at the invoice and so forth. But one thing that's really cool that I want to show you from an accounts payable perspective is, you know, let me go back to my home page. I've got this 49,422. Maybe that's bigger than I need it to be. I have to get some checks out today. I know I have to pay that one invoice that I opened up my demo on for Wide World Imports. Let me show you how many clicks this is to get to the print check screen in Dynamics GP. So I can go ahead and click on overdue purchase invoice amounts. This shows all of my overdue invoice amounts. There's my 108,205 from Wide World Importers. I know I got to pay that, right? And then I also want to pay Nod Publishers and Graphic Design Institute right here. I'm going to pay those 3 invoices and just make sure that they get out today. I can click on create payment. Gives me a little prompt here on what batch do you want to populate with it and how do you want to pay it. Do you want to pay it ACH? Do you want to pay it computer check, or did you pay it with a credit card and you just want to enter a manual payment? So I'm going to say computer check here, and I'm going to click OK. And what happens is, boom, it immediately brings me to, this would be like the edit payables checks window inside Business Central. This is called a payment journal. And you can see I've got 3 checks right here, or 3 payments. And my payment amounts are right over here, $35.84. There's my big one, $13,863 for Wide World Imports. And then I've got another one for Nod Publishers. I am ready to print at this point. I can print my checks. Okay, if I need to have some approval, or I have an extra step where I need the controller to review this batch, of course I could go to request approval and send that approval request. Okay, so the steps and the clicks are much less inside Business Central for these critical items, but we still have the same sort of functionality from a check printing standpoint that we do in GP. You notice up here under Prepare, I've got Suggest Vendor Payments right here. This is the exact same concept as Select Checks inside GP. I can set my due date. I can set my filters on what types of vendors do I want, what types of invoices do I want to pay. Same thing, and it will populate this payment journal the same as my Select Checks process populates my batch inside GP. All right, so it's a really cool functionality there. I can walk away from that batch. That's the same as a batch inside GP. I can come back to it later. All right, no one can pay those checks. They're kind of locked down because they're in an existing batch, and they will not be available for other another user that comes in and runs Suggest Vendor Payments. Those are already in a batch, so they will not be included in that. Any questions about that process right there?
Chris, we don't have any questions at this point.
All right, great.
Related to that, yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to drop down. I showed you these activity lists right here, and the key thing that I wanted you to see was that took you right into a list page that was very similar to the Payables Transaction Smart List inside GP. Now the key difference was inside BC, that Payables Transaction Smart List has a whole bunch of actions and functions that you can do from there. Inside Great Plains, that Payables Transaction Smart List is really kind of a read-only, right? You can't really do much to it. You can go to the document and so forth, but there's not a lot of functions built around it. Inside Business Central, it takes Smart List and really turns it into a functional, actionable tool to do transactions and so forth. Now, if I scroll down on my Roll Center homepage here, you can see I have some tiles. I've got some ongoing purchases and ongoing sales. So if I want to very quickly go to my purchase orders that I have outstanding, I can do that very quickly here. If I have some open sales orders or open sales invoices that haven't been printed, I can do that as well. Down here under Insights, I've got a full Power BI integration, and we have several Power BI dashboards that can be utilized with Business Central. But this is just sort of showing you some business performance metrics in terms of liquidity and total receivables and payables. And then I've got just a very basic top 5 items sold here from within Business Central. And then down here, something that's really cool is a really high level trial balance that I have on my Business Central homepage. I've got basically from top to bottom my income statement. I've got a gross margin percentage. I've got all the way down to net income before interest and tax. And I'll show you in a little bit how you can create different reports like this and then just show them on your Business Central homepage. and you set basically those default values for how the columns represent time. You know, it's this period based on my work date, you know, and it's this period -1 based on my work date. You know, that's how it determines what to show. Okay. And then lastly, this report inbox right here is a really good tool for running reports and having them show up in your own personalized inbox. You know, GP tried to do this several years ago with the report scheduler and the report manager, where you would offload a report to another workstation and it would run it and then it would tell you when it's done. You know, this is that functionality, and you get to set the schedule and so forth. And so you can really come in the morning and have a current historical age trial balance or a current AP trial balance, and then your receive not invoiced, you know, sitting there waiting for you when you get in at 8 o'clock in the morning. So really cool functionality there. Okay, so I'm gonna go away from my Roll Center homepage. I think we've kind of killed this window here. I've beat it to death. But a lot of information here. It's really a starting point, and I think it takes the GP homepage to a whole nother level, right? It gives you a lot more functionality to do from here. So now where I'm going to take you is back to that smart list concept of list pages versus smart list inside Dynamics GP. So because we're playing the role of an AP clerk, I'm going to go to my vendors list right up here at the top. I've got it favorited up here. So I'm going to click on it, and it's going to take me to my list of all of my vendors. And I can really quickly see this is almost like my vendor smart list inside GP. And I've got my balance due, and then I've got my life-to-date payments that I've made to those vendors as well. Now, this is a demo environment, so I've only got about 8 vendors in here. You guys probably have hundreds, if not thousands of vendors. But I do have this really quick search right up here where I can get directly to what I'm looking for in this list. So any list page that I'm looking at, I have a contextual search up here at the top that will look at the columns that I currently have, and typically they're text columns. It will look at those columns that I have, and it will return those search results directly in my list there. Okay, so that's something that SmartList doesn't have, right? You have to actually build out those filters by clicking on the search button and so forth. All right, but also what this has that SmartList does is this filter pane. So if I click on my filter pane over here on the right, this is like that search button inside SmartList. So notice over here, I've got really no filters. I've got a filter list by, and I've got a blank. So maybe I want to filter my list by my balance here. So I'll say filter to this value. And I filtered on balance is equal to 0. But I want to filter on, just show me my open, my vendors that have a balance. So I'm going to change that filter, and I'm going to say, show me all my vendors that have a balance right now. So my filter list, or my one search criteria, is now added over here. And just like SmartList, I can click on my save button up here, and I can say open balance vendors, click on it, and now it is a SmartList favorite that I can come back to time and time again, just like I can in Dynamics GP. Now, huge difference here between Business Central and Dynamics GP is you can add filters till the cows come home. GP, you only have 4, right? You've got 4 searches, and that's it. If you don't get it in 4, then you're doing your filtering inside Excel, which of course you have that exact same functionality here, utilizing this arrow key up here. I can go ahead and open this list in Excel, and I can view it the same as I would inside GP. So I'm using full cloud here for a lot of my Office products, but this opened up my my Office Excel and showed me my SmartList export. So exactly the same as Dynamics GP, but it also puts a little more functionality in terms of a table, and it's got the filters in it. You know, GP is kind of a static, almost like a CSV export. So very cool, takes it to the next level. All right, and of course I can add columns. I can personalize this the same as I can inside a GP. Now this list view, obviously I'm looking at master records or what we call cards, right? We are looking at a vendor card list, and then we have some additional information here. And if you remember, these are the same statistics that we looked at when we were in Outlook, right? We looked up Wide World Importers right here. Remember Toby Road from the beginning of my talk? We looked this up and we saw all of the same information inside Outlook. Now I can turn my fact box set off if I want to show some more real estate, but this gives me all of the information that we would typically be jumping back and forth with in GP. We'd have to go to a vendor payment inquiry to find out when was that last payment date, right? We'd have to go to a number of inquiry windows to get the information that I show right here. I've got outstanding purchase orders, I've got the current balance, and then I've got the sum here, this total, that takes outstanding purchase orders plus the balance to give me really kind of total expected liability for this vendor based on documents that do exist. So really cool heads up right at your fingertips. Now, to go one step further with these list views, I'm looking at a list of open balance vendors. But if I wanted to see, let's say, a payables transactions by vendor, let's think of that inquiry window inside GP. Well, blue text means show me more. All I have to do is drill into my balance, and I'm seeing all of the open invoices that make up that balance in the vendor ledger entries here. Remember, every subledger inside BC has one list called whatever the owning entity is. This is payables, so it's vendor, and then it's ledger entries. Okay, so you're going to have one list that you can go to find out all of your information on what was transacted on that document or on that vendor. On the receivable side, it is the exact same with customer ledger entries because customer is the owning entity of receivables. And of course, because I drilled in from that vendor record in true SmartList fashion, look what it did. It put two filters over here on the left for me. I drilled in from the vendor, so it's vendor 40,000. And then I was also looking at open balance, so it put that filter in there for open balance equal to yes. All right, we are getting close on time here, so I want to show you just a couple of extra things here. Number one, which is the real key differentiator between Business Central and GP from an accounting perspective, is how it treats the chart of accounts. Okay, we know in GP we have a string-based chart of accounts where if we have, let's say, two extra segments for department and let's say product line, that really isn't part of the chart of accounts inside Business Central. The chart of accounts inside Business Central, and I'll show you that list view, very similar to the vendor list view, is really the natural account. We're looking at everything rolled up to the natural. Okay, and you can see another key difference is my totaling accounts here. I can have totaling accounts for total assets. I can see that value right here from my inquiry window. Or I can see total liabilities and I can set up, my basically an entire trial balance top to bottom and look at it directly from this inquiry. My search button up here works as well. I can go ahead and search on INV for inventory. I can quickly get to a specific account. And let's just go to let's go product revenue. I'm going to type in product here. So you might be thinking, well, how do I know what department that is? I'm looking at product sales income. It's 4,200. Yeah, I know the natural account, but what about the other segments? Well, those are what are called dimensions. And if I drill into my net change here, we had 660,000. Here's all of my account transactions. So think of this as my account transaction smart list inside GP. This is every debit, every credit, okay? So if you look here, I can see here's my GL account number. Remember, I came from product sales income, which is account 4,200. Now I have my dimensions right here. Here's my department code, and here's my customer group code. In this environment, those are my two extra segments in the GL. So I can very quickly see that all of these came from invoices, right? And these were all department of sales, and these were all customer group code of large, medium, small, right? I can filter on all this information. I can run trial balances for departments and customer groups and so forth. And I have a whole bunch of inquiry windows where I can show, account, department, and so forth concatenated. but this is really my account transaction smart list. And this gets me to the level of detail that I need to do my research and to find out what dimensions are associated. Over here on the right, if I have this selected, notice you see the rest of the journal entry. So I can see 10,400, 10,700, 2,600. I got some sales tax. Just like in GP at this GL line level, I have a glimpse into where did this originate. This was an invoice. This came from a particular customer. I could personalize this and bring that in. Let me see if I can do that now. If I want to see the customer number that that generated this invoice, I think that's source number here. So I could bring in. It's nice that I know the invoice, but I also want to know who the customer number is. And there it is. There's my source number. This is the same as master ID in your account transaction smart list. For those of you that know, you can pull that into the general ledger entries and you can see specifically what journals were created by which customers. So real quick, if I want to see all of my production sales revenue by this particular customer ID of 30,000, I can just select that, filter to this value. Now, if I open up my filters pane, you can see I'm filtering on 4,200 where customer is 30,000, and I'm seeing all of those transactions right here. And of course, if I want to look at this entry, I certainly can. I can drill in and I can show the document. I'm going to go to Find Entries here, because this is kind of like your master drill back or drill through from subledger to general ledger. So when I clicked on that and I said, find me all the related entries, what it's doing is it's looking at all of the other subledgers and telling me what records exist. So I have a customer ledger entry record that exists, which is the invoice itself. There was sales tax, so I have some sales tax entries that exist. I have 9 GL entries, debits and credits, that are associated with this invoice. And then of course I have one document, this posted sales invoice. And I can drill back to that one document, see it if I want to. Here it is, invoice 103198. There are my 2 line items to my customer, and so forth. Okay, so you might be asking, well, how did it know what account to use when you posted that invoice and what dimension to use? How did it know that that customer was a sales department code, or that it was a customer group code of large? Well, it happens the exact same way that it happens inside GP. It all comes from the who and the what of the transaction. Who was the transaction on? It was on a customer record. This customer is part of the large customer group. And then the what was, what did we sell on the line? We sold products or inventory items, and those inventory items are coded to a particular department or so forth. So you've got a lot of different ways to determine how GL accounts are derived and how dimensions are defaulted in on specific transactions. I think we're coming up on 12 minutes here. The last thing that I want to show you is another integration with Office, which is called the Excel add-in. I did show you how you could export a smart list out of Business Central and showed it inside of Excel. But for those people that are dependent on Integration Manager to update customer records or import new records, I wanted to show you what tools come out of the box. And Edit in Excel is a great tool that comes out of the box. And I'm just going to show this to you in my other environment here. So I'm in a different company, Kronos Distribution. So I'm going to go to my accounts here, and I want to change some account descriptions, and I want to do it in mass, okay? So I'm going to go to my chart of accounts list, which was the same list that I was just in, and I've got some liabilities down here that let me find them. I've got some prepaid liabilities here. They're set to PPD. I don't understand what PPD is. I want to change that from PPD to prepaid on the descriptions. Well, what I can do is I don't have to go to every single record and do it. Okay, I can go right up here and say, let me edit this in Excel. So I'm going to click on edit, and it's going to do the same thing that it would do if you were exporting this into Excel to do an analysis, but it's going to give me some extra functionality here. And this all relates to my security. And let me pull up this Excel file that opened. So it reached out with that same single point of sign-on, right? My Office 365 account, and it returned my my list here of all my accounts. And notice how I have this data connector over here on the right. So I can now make my changes inside Excel. I could use all the functionality in Excel, and I can make changes and say, I want that to say prepaid. I want this to say prepaid as well. And I can do some search and replace. I can do a lot of things here, but I'm just going to keep it to this. So I changed it from PPD to prepaid. And I'm going to go over here on the right, and I'm going to publish these results back to Business Central. And it happened very quick, but it did tell me that it found 2 changes and it published them successful. If you can see that message down here, that's what it did. So if I go back into my Business Central, there's the line item. If I refresh, remember I just did it and I just published it. Take a look at what it did. It changed my description right there. Prepaid hardware contracts. Okay, and it looked like I did 22,950, not 22,970 in my Excel file. I missed this guy. It changed my heading. But think of the power of that when you have salespeople that need to be realigned with your customers, or you have address updates from vendors, or location updates for ship tos on customers. You basically have an edit in Excel functionality across the board for all of your master records. And in some cases, you have it on documents as well. So for those of you that are dependent on Integration Manager to bring in new items or to bring in new customers or anything like that, you can utilize that functionality to do that. Okay, I think we're at 8 minutes here, Mark. Is this a good stopping point?
Yeah, because we have a couple questions too, Chris. So if we can
sure.
Address those questions, and then I can spend the last few minutes covering a few other outstanding items. I think it's a good time. Okay. So let me pose a couple questions that came up. I wanted your input on it. The first one, I think I know the possibilities here. But the question is, with the vendor list, are we able to see what vendors do not have a tax ID number without going into each and every contact? And I'm assuming we could add that just to a view, correct, Chris?
Absolutely. So if you're in here on your filtering, if I click filter, I've got every single field related to the vendor. So here's the tax identification type. Here's the tax area code, the tax registration number, which is what it's called inside Business Central. So I can just do a filter directly on that and save that as a favorite. Absolutely.
Perfect. Judy, just let me know if that answers your question. The next question, I'm not sure if I quite understand the context. Are the number for vendors auto-populated, or would we be able to choose the number?
Yep.
Or what if we list vendor by specific vendor codes?
Yep. So you've got the ability to utilize a feature that's called number series inside Business Central. So when we look at new vendors, we're in the implementation process, we're going to make the determination, do we want the system to provide the numbers, or do we want to provide the numbers when we're entering the vendor record? So if we choose the system to supply them, then we create a specific number series that will determine how we create this number mask. Okay, and if you look here, let me see if I can find the vendor one here. We have vendors right here. If we were to create any new vendors, they have a starting number of V0010 and an ending number of V999990. Now you can set up one bank like this, or you can set up multiple if you have different types of vendors and you want to have a prefix that's different. Then it will just ask you what's the prefix you want to use, V, I, R, and then it will go ahead and dole out the next number.
All right, perfect. And so if you can let us know that answers your question, I believe it. Hopefully it does, but if not, just let us know. Beyond that, Chris, I am going to take back control of the screen, show my screen, and let's get back into PowerPoint. Get rid of this item here. All right, so presentation today. I know we covered a lot. There was just a lot of information there. There was a couple questions about maybe diving deeper into specific areas. I think the response back to that, and everybody should have seen it, is that if there's certain things that you want to see that are very specific to your scenario, let us know. Let us know. We can always schedule a one-off personal presentation and demonstration on specific topics that are of interest to you. But as a reminder, we're continuing this Lunch and Learn series. We've finished the first two as of today. These are the first two that we've already presented. So if you did not attend the first one, let me know. We can always send you a recording for that. Today we did Intro to BC for the GP user. Next, we're going to be doing reporting in BC. Big question. Where in the GP world, we used to use FRX, then they moved us to Management Reporter. What are the reporting options now in Business Central? And we'll talk about in that next webinar the different options you might have. So what are the native reporting capabilities within Business Central? And then what are some of the other reporting capabilities? Chris kind of highlighted one of them. Well, we can leverage Power BI and embed Power BI objects right into Business Central. So that's one option. And we can start using some of these third-party tools that have become quite popular. They're all kind of Excel-based and have you working in an Excel front end and pulling the data out into an Excel or Excel-like format, which most financial people like. Then we're looking at I'm trying to squeeze that in before the holidays, and maybe you guys can give me some feedback. I was trying to plan on doing that the 21st of December. So let me know if that's a good idea or a bad idea. I don't know if I'm pushing that up too close to the holidays or not, but I'd like to try to get the reporting in BC squeezed in the month of December. So if you can give me some feedback in the questions pane on whether 12/21 would work for most, or if maybe early part of January would be better. I know early part of January is just a tough time with month-end close, year-end close, audits kicking in. So if you can give me some feedback there, I certainly would appreciate it. Then definitely in January, moving to DC, what about my data? February, we'll be touching on payroll and HR in Business Central. And then in March, we'll be looking at workflow. There's a lot of native workflow capability. So we'll be touching on that as well. So we have a nice list of monthly webinars that we're going to be conducting in the near future. Last, as far as final thoughts, when it comes to any of these types of changes, you need to be discussing it internally and planning now. Even if you're thinking 3 years out, it's 3 years is not that long from now. So you really need to start having those discussions, setting those expectations internally, doing the appropriate planning, evaluating your options, and clearly communicating the timelines to all involved, internally and externally, so that people can appropriately prepare, properly prepare for whatever plans you have. And I referenced this earlier. ACE is excited about Business Central, but ACE has been a long time supporter of GP as well. So if GP is where you see yourself for the near future, that's fine too. Okay, we have no problem with that. We're here to support you. But if Business Central is something you're trying to contemplate and want to evaluate and make a decision on, we're here to help in that process. Beyond that, we're almost at the top of the hour, so I will take the moment to thank everybody for attending. We certainly appreciate it. We know everybody's time is extremely valuable, so thanks for taking this hour with us. And we hope that you're able to attend our next session. Everybody have a great afternoon. Thanks so much.